Hey everyone, welcome to the Heavenly Treasury broadcast, where we talk to believers about God's financial abundance for your life and how to achieve that for you, your family, and for those around you. And I'm greatly blessed to be here on this Thursday, and I hope you are having a wonderful week so far. Today we're going to talk about preparing to prosper in an economic downturn. No matter what's going on, are you prepared to prosper right now? All right? Here's how we're going to do that. We're going to talk about that throughout the session, and a lot of that comes up, okay? There's a lot of talk, doesn't matter where it is, when, about economic downturns per se. Now, the Bible talks about famines, okay? We haven't typically seen a famine per se where people are just starving and barely making it. I mean, we do have economic downturns where people are struggling, not putting that aside. But biblically speaking, when is the last time that America has had a time when people literally could not get food and they were going without meals? It hasn't happened in my lifetime, and it probably hasn't happened in yours either. But we do have economic downturns where there are large things that happen in the economy, so to speak. I mean, we'll talk about a little bit about that today. But for the most part, we're going to talk about how you can come out on the better side of anything. No matter what economic conditions are coming around, you can prosper and should prosper, believe it or not. Okay? This is probably an area where your church and I are going to very disagree. And that's okay, because I want to talk about what I feel the Bible talks about, okay? I'm not going to warp my worldview and to match the Bible. I'm going to read the Bible and then apply it to the world, okay? That's a very big difference that most of the spiritual wisdom that you're receiving probably comes from, if any at all, that whoever is preaching your biblical wisdom to you likely has a specific worldview of politics, of economics, of society, and all that, and then they read the Bible through that lens and unfortunately give you a very warped view. And again, the Bible is very crystal clear that you should be prospering no matter what conditions are around you. Okay, that's going to be a very different message than you've probably heard. If you currently are, believe me, continue watching this broadcast. You will not stay the same for long. God is going to get you out. God's going to prosper you, and God's going to take you to a place that you can't even imagine right now. And that includes financial abundance. I don't care where you are. God's path is increase, increase, and increase, okay? And I want to start out with a couple of Psalms in here to kind of show you that, okay? The first is obviously the very first Psalm, okay? Psalm number 1, okay? These are beautiful, beautiful songs and prayers in here. I thoroughly enjoy reading these all the time. It just builds my spirit beyond belief, okay? But Psalm 1, starting at verse 2. Blessed is the man who shall not, I'm going to start at verse 1. Blessed is the man who shall not walk in the counsel of the wrong, and shall not stand in the path of sinners, and shall not sit in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the Torah of God, and he meditates in his Torah day and night. For he shall be as a tree planted by the rivers of water, whose leaves do not wither. Let me read that again. And whose leaf does not wither, and whatever he does prospers. Okay? Blessed is the man who shall not walk in the counsel of the wrong. Let me repeat that again. That whose leaf does not wither. Meaning your leaves, your work, your abundance does not wither. And whatever he does prospers. Okay? Now you have to match that against any other biblical verse that says, hey, you're supposed to be struggling. You're supposed to have hard times. Okay? That's not biblical. On top of that, I'm going to give you another Psalm, Psalm 84. Let's go here real quick. Okay? Psalm 84, we're going to start at verse 5. Blessed is the man whose strength is in you, Father. Your highways are in their hearts. Passing through the valley of weeping, they make it a fountain. The teacher also covers it with blessings. They go from strength to strength. Let me repeat that. They go from strength to strength, appearing before God in Zion. Okay? Let me say that again. Passing through the valley of weeping, they make it a fountain. So if you're passing by an area where everybody is crying, you should be a fountain of life. And that includes your financial abundance. Okay? That's a command straight from the Bible. And we're going to show you how to do that throughout this content. And particularly today, we're going to talk about how to do that and prepare for that when an economic downturn does occur. Because they will occur, okay? Obviously, there's very different views on who does it, and we're going to discuss that right now, okay? Where do you get your financial news from? Where do you get the idea that an economic downturn is coming? Now, if all you talk to is your neighbors and all your neighbors just lost your jobs, okay, then you got 4 or 5 neighbors and they all lost their jobs, you probably think this country's in a recession, okay? It really does depend on your specific outlook as well as the outlook of others. But assuming you're not just getting your entire worldview from your locals, okay, or your local friends or whatever, say you got 10 friends and all 10 of them are doing poorly financially, you probably think the country's in a recession. And therefore, you're likely going to do the same thing. All right, here's a key for you. Your income likely matches that of your 5 closest friends. Do you realize that? If your 5 closest friends are broke, you're likely broke. Even if you're rich and your 5 closest friends are broke, you will soon be broke. All right? So putting that aside, let's think about how we get this idea that, hey, maybe an economic downturn is coming, or maybe, hey, everything is going to be great and dandy so far with the entire economy, so to speak. Okay? Really, in my opinion, in my financial news that I have studied, and I watch it all the time. Thankfully, I also watch a good deal of sermons that build my spirit, that no matter what comes at me, word-wise, whether it's from a screen, whether it's from the news, I don't really get affected very much, okay? So I can read that and give you an objective view without saying, hey, I'm going to apply my worldview to this, because I'm not going to do that when I'm here. I'm just not, okay? It's not going to help you. It's not going to help me. So if there's really 2 camps, in my opinion, that most financial news falls in. The first is everything's always great. Have you ever watched CNBC and they said, wow, there's going to be a big downturn? Never. There never is. Every single person on there always predicts up and up and up, up and up and up. Again, if that's your sincere outlook, that's fine. But every single time, every single moment, you shouldn't have up and up and up. I mean, when the entire government announces they're shutting the country down in March and April 2020, you can't predict an up and up and up from there. Okay, things are shutting down, business is stopping. It's gonna be hurtful for the rest of the country, okay? But for the most part, CNBC's in there, Fox Business is kind of in there as well. Other financial news, those are really the 2 big ones. And they're always talking about things are gonna be great, and the economy is gonna continually grow, and it's gonna be fantastic all the way through. Now, why do you think that is? Of course, they're in it for ratings, but CNBC and Fox Business and others have a very different financial motive that you may have not thought about. Who owns those networks? It's the same firms that are profiting off of your accounts in the markets, okay? So they have a financial incentive to say, hey, things are going good. Things are going great. On top of that, there are financial firms on Wall Street that will send their analysts on those TV screens to say, hey, our prediction by our firm is that this thing is going to go up, while at the same time, their accounts are shorting it. So they're telling you, the viewer, to buy this thing, but guess who's offloading that thing to you, the viewer? Them, the firm. So there is a lot of that going on in the background that you may have not thought of, okay? And that happens quite a bit. It's very, very, it's not good. It's very deceptive. And of course, the deception is going to be there one way or the other. It is the world. It is the world's financial system. So don't be surprised when people lie, cheat, and steal to make a buck out there if all they're worshiping is that almighty dollar. Okay? But that's really the first camp, is everything's always great. And those networks are going to continue to get you to do that. Okay? The other camp is the world's going to crash tomorrow. Do you ever read that? There are organizations whose news is always negative. It's always, always negative. And again, they're going to be right at some point, and they have been and they will be in the future. But if you're always, always reading that, what do you think's going to be your worldview? Everything's going to crash. And if everything's going to crash, you can't prosper. If you believe everything's going to crash tomorrow, you can't prosper. You can't, okay? So think about that for a second. There is a dichotomy in there between those 2 camps of everything's always going to be great or the world's going to end tomorrow. I mean, there's a big analyst in that world going to end tomorrow camp who literally just did a live broadcast last week titled "The Entire Economy is About to Implode." If you watch that day in and day out, what do you think's going to happen to you? It's going to be fear. It's going to be massive, massive fear. Again, I'm sure the guy made some great points, and I'm not going to criticize him. I'm not even going to name his name. But the reality is, if you're watching that all the time, all you're going to be thinking about is, wait, the economy's going to crash tomorrow. I got to hunker down and get my guns and my food and my ammo and all that stuff. That's not how God wants you to live, by the way. Okay. Now, again, these people do offer a different viewpoint, which is nice to hear. Believe it. But if you're camped there forever, that's a problem. Okay. Because let's say an economic downturn does come. If you're in the everything's always great, well, you're looking up and everything doesn't appear to be great. So now you're living in fear because you believe things that were going to be great, but now they're not. So now what do? You're in fear. You're paralyzed. Again, you say, I don't know what to do. That's when emotional decisions come. That's the problem. That's when most emotional decisions come, is when you're in a moment of fear. And that's when things happen, and those are decisions that you make today on haste, without thinking, without asking the Lord, that will affect you months and months into the future. And so I really want to be careful with that when things are shaking and the enemy is trying to attack you and your finances and your economic garden that the Lord has given you, you have to go to him. That is the time when you really have to press in, and he will give you guidance, and you will come out much better on top, much better if you seek him first. Okay. The other problem with everything's always terrible and the world's going to crash tomorrow is that when that does happen, you're really just celebrating that, hey, I'm finally right. You're not celebrating that, hey, my predictions are good. Now I'm finally making money. Now you're saying, hey, I'm finally right. And you're celebrating that. There are literally people who will celebrate when bad stuff happens. And if you're always watching that stuff, it's gonna hurt your mind. And so if you're ever going to prosper and prosper continually, which is the way the Lord wants you to, he wants you to prosper continually no matter where you are in your life, no matter what's going on around you. He wants you to do that. If you're always looking at negative stuff, especially economics, you're going to be paralyzed. You're not going to start that new business. You're not going to go into prayer. You're not going to sow seed. You're not going to do any of the good, important stuff that the Lord really, really, really wants you to do. Okay? I want to make that clear. So it's okay to listen to the stuff, but don't camp your mind there. Camp your mind in him and his word and his spirit. Okay? That'll build your spirit to the right economic place for you to prosper and be in God's financial abundance for your life. Okay? But let's say we are preparing for some sort of an economic downturn. Okay, what's the best way to do that? Obviously, there's things that you can predict in the future. We'll get to that in a second. But the best thing that we have to do is we have to have some seed available for our own personal finances. Okay, in short, in layman terms, that means some savings. So what does that mean? We're not spending everything that we earn today. We need that storehouse. Okay, so why do we do that? Just think about this for a second. When you hear other financial commentators talk about money and they say, don't spend everything that you earn. Why is that? Seriously, just think about that for a second. Why do you not spend everything that you earn? Now, some people could spend everything that they earn and even more than they earn if they can quote unquote manage their debt. A lot of people in the world do that, believe it or not. They have a credit card balance. They have some personal loan balance that never goes down. It just stays the same. And when they need more money, they just, instead of generating more and building more economics, they actually go in and get more loans. Okay, and they just manage the interest. They do that for their entire life. A lot of people do that. You'd be surprised at how many people do that. Okay, with a country that's $33 trillion in debt, a lot of the people who vote for that are also in debt, and they're okay with being in debt. So again, there are a lot of people who manage that. And again, it's not just your house. It's not just, hey, instead of paying down my house, that's 3 or 4 or 5% mortgage rate, I'm going to go over here and get 8% instead. It's not just that. It's people who have credit cards at 15 to 20% and say, hey, I can manage this. That's a problem, okay? That's not how the Lord wants you to live, okay? But in the end, those are people who can quote unquote manage debt. And so when somebody tells them to spend less than they earn, they just scoff and go the other way. They scoff and go the other way. You can't live in God's financial abundance doing that, but that's what a lot of people think when they say, why shouldn't we spend less than we earn? How about this? Have you ever heard it's the right thing to do? I'm sure you have. Why spend everything that you earn? Because it's the right thing to do. That's a problem too. Where's that in the Bible? It's the right thing to do. Okay? To spend less than you earn. All right? How about this? The guy on TV said so. And everybody who spends less than they earn who calls in gets celebrated. That's also not a legitimate reason. You're just going with the flow. You're going with the crowd. That's a problem. If you cannot right now give me a legitimate biblical reason why you shouldn't spend anything less than the earn, believe me, you're about to get it. And you're going to be really blessed by it, I promise you. Because when you follow this Bible, when you follow this book, whole in and whole out, you'll be blessed financially. And we're gonna reveal the concepts and things for you to do on this content. We always will, okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to some scripture for some biblical reasons why we build a storehouse of savings, okay? We're going to start with Proverbs, okay? We're going to go to Proverbs chapter 6, verse 6, okay? It says this, "Go to the ant, you lazy one, see her ways and be wise, which, having no commander, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer, gathers her food in the harvest." Okay? That means you're gathering now when things are going fantastic. And they always should be going fantastic, but when they're significantly better than they normally are, now is the time to gather more. And where do you put them? Into your storehouse. Okay? That's Proverbs 6. Proverbs 30 says something very, very similar. Okay? Proverbs 30 is starting at verse 24 is going to say this. There are 4 legs which are little on the earth, but they are exceedingly wise. The ants are a people not strong, yet they prepare their food in the summer. Meaning, build your storehouse, build your food, store your food. Okay? They didn't have quote unquote money in King Solomon's days. They had gold, silver, precious metals. Today we just have pieces of paper. All right? But those are the biblical reasons why you have a storehouse. Deuteronomy 28 also commands that if you hearken unto the voice of the Lord your God and do all that he commands, that one of the blessings is that your storehouse will be blessed. If you don't have a storehouse, your storehouse can't be blessed. That's the reason why. Okay? That's the reason. Biblical reason why. And so as we prepare for what may or may not occur in the future, the best thing for you to do right now is to create that storehouse and build it and make it fantastic. Now, there are certain limits to your storehouse when, hey, I've got enough here for liquid. Hey, I've got enough, just in case for unexpected stuff. And now I can put it somewhere else. That's a different conversation than what we're having today. These are people who have never built anything before in their life. And I'm going to give you a reason why in the future you'll see why you're very, very blessed when you do that. All right. So now let's say an economic downturn or shift does come. Because remember, economic downturns per se are just shifts. Okay? So if you remember in the last big economic downturn that we had, quarter 2 of 2020, a third of our economy was wiped out. Now, we recovered most of it in the next quarter, but at that moment, GDP in Q2 of 2020 declined 1/3. That's a big loss. But again, a lot of people did very, very poorly during then. Okay? So for example, if you were a hotel chain, you did very poorly. If you were an airline, you did very, very poorly. At the same time, on the flip side, Zoom, the application Zoom, the video conferencing, 100 times increase. 100 times increase in Zoom. What do you think that did for them? Up and up and up. That's what I mean by a shift. Some areas do poorly, others do well. Now, if you're wise, you can be good on that. Okay? What do I mean by that? All right. Let's say you were a cleaning company in 2019, and you're a believer, and you're working wholeheartedly into the Lord, and right now the Lord had placed you in that cleaning business to prepare you, and the Lord said, "Get bigger distribution. Take all the money you have and get bigger distribution in 2019." Do it now. And you said, "I don't feel like doing that. That doesn't make sense." Well, guess what? You missed out on a massive harvest if you missed that. Okay? But you couldn't have done that step that the Lord gave you if you didn't have a storehouse to be able to do it. This is another reason why we build a storehouse. Because when the Lord asks you for it, he has a good harvest in mind for it. He's not just taking your money because he feels like it. He doesn't need your money. He lives on streets paved with gold. He needs your heart. And when you have your heart set on him, he's going to give you supernatural ideas to prosper when we have that shift. When we have that shift. So that's why it's so important for you to build that storehouse right now. Starting right now. Okay? So let's go to a biblical example of a feast versus famine season. Now again, remember, these are seasons in your country. These are not for you personally. You don't have to go through a famine personally. I've already showed that at the beginning of the broadcast. You don't have to do that. But there will be times when there are shifts in your economy where there is an economic downturn. There are. Why? Because not everybody is a believer who's wholeheartedly seeking him. If everyone was a believer in your country and wholeheartedly seeking the Lord, you wouldn't have economic downturns. You wouldn't. Because Psalm 1 and Psalm 84 would be in the faith of every single believer. If that was the case, then the Lord would be able to protect you and make you prosper in any season. In any season. Okay? So just keep that in mind. That's why we have economic downturns in our country, not necessarily for us personally. Okay? But let's go to Genesis 41 as we talk about a very famous biblical famine that really gives us detailed from start to finish. All right? Genesis 41 is when Joseph went to Pharaoh and interpreted that dream and said 7 years of feast for 7 years of famine. Okay? That's what he did for Joseph. And so this is what Joseph told the Pharaoh. He said, "This is the word which I spoke to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do." Let me say that again. What he is about to do. God. All right? "See, after 7 years of great plenty are coming in all the land of Egypt. But after them 7 years of scarcity of food shall arise, and all the plenty be forgotten in the land of Egypt. And the scarcity of food shall destroy the land, and the plenty shall not be remembered in the land because of the scarcity of food following, for it is very severe." And the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice because the word is established by God, and God is hastening to do it. Okay? So there it is. A famine is coming. And they knew it, and they knew about it. Joseph knew about it because God said, he told Joseph, hey, a famine is coming. So he told Pharaoh, and Pharaoh took advantage of that. He didn't shy away from it. He took advantage of that. Now, here's why the storehouse is so important. Let's say now an economic downturn comes. And again, you don't have Psalm 1 or Psalm 84 in your spirit, and now you're just living with the world. What happens? Let's go to Genesis 47 to see your future. Okay? We're going to start at verse 15. "And when all the silver was spent in the land of Egypt," what does that mean? When all the savings was spent because you didn't build a storehouse. What does that do now? And in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the silver is gone." And here's what happens. And Joseph said, "Give your livestock, and I will give you bread for your livestock if the silver is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for their horses, their flocks, and so on and so forth. And he fed them in exchange for all their livestock. Now, maybe you don't have livestock, okay? Unless you live on a farm, but you do have assets. You have a car. Horses were transportation. Your car is your transportation now, okay? Maybe you have stocks and bonds. You have to sell those in order to fund your endeavors because you didn't build a storehouse. Okay? You got to sell your investments. That's a problem because those investments were meant to build wealth for the kingdom. Now you have to sell it because you weren't wise. Okay? So that's number one. The next is Genesis. This is the next two verses. Here it is. "And when that year had ended, they came to him the next year and said to him, 'We do not hide from my master that our silver is all spent, and my master also has the livestock we owned. There has not been left any before my master but our bodies in our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and let us and our land be servants of Pharaoh, and give us seed, and let us live and not die, and let the land not lie waste.'" What does that mean? Your land is your house. You're going to have to move. Even if you don't want to. Even if that house has been in your generation for 2 or 3 generations, you now have to move because you weren't wise when the economic famine season comes. That's what happens. Okay? And what does it mean to sell yourself? That means you have to go to a job because you don't have any savings, you don't have any storehouse, you don't have any way to fund a business endeavor, so now you have to go to a job. And it's likely a job you don't like. That's a problem. God doesn't want you there. He wants you to prosper in a place where he wants you. But if you don't have that in place, that's where your future is. And then in verse 20 and 21, he tells them to move into the cities, out of their lands, out of their fields, and into the cities. What does that mean? You are now living around a bunch of desperate people in a famine season. Do you think that's fun? Go live in a recession in any big city, good luck. You don't want to be there. Number one, there's going to be very little food. Number two, crime is going to be through the roof. Number three, everybody's going to be desperate. And desperate people do terrible decisions. That's going to be the future if we're not prepared now. Again, all of this is the future if we don't build a storehouse and we aren't wise when a famine season comes. But what happens if we were wise? And again, we do have Psalm 1 and Psalm 84 in our spirit. Say, hey, my leaves never wither. In everything I do, I prosper. Father, thank you for that. Father, thank you that no matter what comes around me, I go from strength to strength. When everybody else is weeping, I'm a fountain. What if that's you? Here's your future. Verse 23, same chapter, Genesis 47. And Joseph said to the people, look, I have bought you today and your land for Pharaoh. Look, here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And it shall be that in the harvest you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh, and 4/5 is your own, as seed for your field and for food, for those of your household, and as food for your little ones. And they said, you have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the eyes of my master, and we shall be Pharaoh's servants. They're thankful to be servants. They're thankful to basically be slaves. That's our future if we don't get these scriptures in our spirit. But you know them now. They're in your spirit. But look what happens. You get all that wealth coming to you in the economic downturn. You get that because everybody has to sell things for pennies on the dollar to feed their families. And guess who has a storehouse to buy them for pennies on the dollar? You do. That's your future. So much more wealth can be made in economic downturns than economic upturns if you're wise during the economic upturn. Okay? Think about that for a second. I'm not putting aside that people are struggling during that time. I'm not, especially non-believers, which is why when economic downturns occur and you live in financial abundance, guess what they're going to do? They're going to come to you saying, what did you do? Well, I had Jesus. He told me to do this, this, and this. He can do that for you too. That's how the kingdom advances too. So this is not just about you and your family and your finances. This is about his kingdom too. That's going to happen if you're wise during the feast. If you're wise during the feast, when the famine season comes, now you are significantly better off afterwards than you were before. That's what Scripture guarantees us if we follow it and put it in our spirit and do the action steps it takes, one of which is building a storehouse. There's a lot of other things we could talk about, but I just really want to focus that on today is building that storehouse to be able to have the opportunities when the economic shift comes. Okay? Again, not getting into economic predictions in the future. That's not the purpose of this. But let's say for the moment that we do have a recession coming down. All right. Right now, bonds are at the lowest point they've been in very, very long time. All right. The mortgage rate is about to hit 8%. Why? Because the 30-year treasury is significantly high. That's why. Okay. A lot of reasons for that. But let's say we do have an economic recession coming in. Every single economic slowdown that has been deflationary, when prices come down and the economy contracts, bonds have typically gone through the roof. So let's say your prediction right now is an economic downturn before the end of the year, a big one. Okay? You can position yourself to make a lot of money. You can. Now, again, that's just one way to do it. If that's your prediction and that's your philosophy, I'm not making financial predictions. I'm not telling you what to invest in. But when you do have a storehouse, I'm just giving you an idea. And the reason I'm giving you an idea is, let's say for the moment, you look at that and you're like, man, I don't know if I want to do that. At least you're thinking, hey, how can I come out of this better than before? That's how we continue being a master in the marketplace, which is what I talked about, I believe is the last session or the session beforehand. Okay, so a week ago today, I did a session on being a financial master. That's one of the big reasons why. Because especially when there's an economic downturn, which is a shift, you can be in that shift and make significant money. You can make significant wealth, better than you ever have before in your life. Again, not putting aside that people are hurting, especially non-believers. But for you, the believer, that's how we can build God's kingdom even better. Even better. All right? Now, again, this is why, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, all these things will be added unto you. So now you have to prepare your assets today, to be able to get for that shift whenever it comes. Okay? It may come next month, next year, next 5 years. If you just think about this for a second and go back to the doom and gloom financial news. Okay? If you told any one of them 15 years ago that the Federal Reserve's balance sheet would quadruple, we would have a $33 trillion national debt, and we would have a quarter where a third of our GDP was wiped out, could we still function as a society? They would have bet their house saying no. Well, guess what? All of them have been wrong. So again, they will be right in the future, not putting that aside. But if you just park in one of these camps and not listen to the word of God, you're going to be in a mess. Okay, so again, the whole purpose is to have that positive outlook with the Lord, wherever is going on, to not live in fear, and to put these scriptures in your spirit. Put the scriptures in your spirit so you're prospering all the time. You can. God commands you to it. Okay? He does. Now, I mean, just think about this. If you had bought Clorox, I mean, again, not making stock predictions, but if you had bought Clorox when everybody else was going through the toilet, you would have doubled and tripled your money. All right? That's a shift. But you have to be able on the right side and make the preparations beforehand to be able to do that. All right? Like I gave the example of the cleaning business. If you were in a cleaning business in 2019, it was just you and a couple other people making some cleaning products, saying, hey, I'm just going to go out there, do this thing. You know, the Lord told me to do it. Maybe I'll just go half in. And then all of a sudden the Lord wakes you up in the middle of the night and says, do it. Expand now. Okay? And you don't do it. Well, that's a problem because you didn't listen to him. And remember, obedience always yields a financial reward with the Lord. There's no one in the Bible who did everything the Lord asked them to and ended up poorer. They always ended up richer. They did. All right, I'm not going to apologize for that, and you shouldn't either. Why? Because that leads to greater financial abundance for you, his kingdom, and that means more people are going to want to follow you, which means more people go into the kingdom themselves. Okay, that's one great way to fill heaven to the brim with lost souls. Because you have the easiest way for you to bring souls into the kingdom is to have a life here on earth that they want. And that means financial abundance no matter what's going on around you. Okay? With that being said, I really hope you are blessed today. And I just hope you have a very blessed Thursday. We'll come to you next week with some great topics. Again, take care, everybody.